14 years I gave to Web Logistics, built their entire cold storage division from scattered spreadsheets and crossed fingers into something that actually worked, prevented federal violations, secured multi-million-dollar contracts, spent winter nights in freezer warehouses fixing equipment failures at 2 a.m. while everyone else slept. My boss, Marcus, replaced me with his 26-year-old nephew who'd never worked a day in logistics. Said the kid's MBA made him qualified. 6 months after I walked out, federal investigators showed up, asking about the $2.3 million in compliance violations I documented. And Marcus Webb finally learned the difference between managing a company and just occupying the corner office while someone else holds it together. But to understand how we got there, you need to know what happened that Tuesday morning when I walked into his office and smelled burnt coffee, the kind that's been sitting on the warmer for hours, bitter and abandoned, which is exactly how I was about to feel. "Appreciate you coming in early, Lauren," Marcus said, without looking up from his phone. I sat down across from him. It was 7:45 a.m. I'd been coming in early for 14 years, since I was 29 years old, and this company was small enough that everyone knew your name. Now we had 3 regional hubs across Northern California, and I managed every pharmaceutical shipment, every temperature-controlled cargo load, every federal compliance audit that kept us certified. Marcus finally set his phone down. His smile looked practiced. "Got some exciting news. We're bringing in fresh leadership for the cold storage team, someone with international experience." The air hummed above us. Through his window, I could see the loading bay where I'd once saved a $180,000 shipment by catching a refrigeration malfunction before it ruined everything inside, where I'd built something that mattered. My pen stopped moving. I wasn't aware we were hiring for my position. Not hiring, transitioning. "You'll stay on. We need your institutional knowledge during the handover." That word, handover. Like 14 years of my expertise was just something I could gift wrap and pass along to whoever walked through the door next. "Who's taking over?" Marcus's smile widened. "My nephew, actually, Jordan Webb. Just finished his MBA at Berkeley. Brilliant kid. Studied supply chain optimization in Singapore. Exactly the kind of forward-thinking leader we need." Something cold and sharp slid down my spine. Not anger yet. Recognition. The kind you get when you suddenly understand you've been reading a situation wrong for months, maybe years, and reality is uglier than you wanted to admit. "When does he start?" "Next Monday." Marcus leaned back like this was already decided. Already done, already not worth discussing. "I'll need you to prepare transition documentation. Everything you do, every process, every contact, make it easy for him." Make it easy. As if easy was what I've been doing for 14 years. As if building this division from nothing had been simple. As if I hadn't earned every inch of respect I thought I had. "This isn't a demotion, Lauren," he added, reading something in my face. "It's just evolution. You understand." I nodded, because that's what people like me do when our world shifts beneath our feet. We nod. We say we understand. We carry our bleeding hearts into the hallway and keep walking like nothing just broke. The meeting ended with his assistant bringing in Jordan's headshot for the announcement email. 26 years old. Confident smile. Expensive haircut. He looked like someone who'd never had to prove himself to anyone who mattered, who'd never sat in a freezing warehouse at midnight troubleshooting a system failure while his breath fogged the air and his coffee went cold. I went back to my desk, the one I'd occupied for over a decade, surrounded by temperature monitoring systems I'd designed, compliance manuals I'd written, photos from client dinners where people thanked me for saving their contracts. My hands shook when I opened my email. Not from fear, from something deeper. Something that felt like grief mixed with rage, mixed with the terrible clarity that comes when you finally see how little you've meant to people you gave everything to. That afternoon, Marcus held an all-hands meeting. Jordan walked in wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent, shaking hands like a politician, smiling like someone who'd already won something he didn't know he'd have to earn. Really excited to bring innovative thinking to this department. My uncles told me great things about the foundation you've all built. Can't wait to take it to the next level. People applauded. Polite, uncomfortable applause. I noticed how no one looked at me. They already knew. Everyone always knows before you do. They just hope you won't notice them noticing. After the meeting, Jordan cornered me by the break room. "Hey, Lauren, right? Uncle Marcus says you're the go-to person for everything around here." "I've been managing cold storage operations before you graduated high school," I said, keeping my voice even. He laughed like I made a joke. "That's awesome, seriously. So listen, I'm gonna need you to walk me through everything, like everything. I want to understand the whole operation before I start making improvements." "Improvements to what?" "Well, he waved vaguely. Systems get outdated. People get comfortable. Fresh eyes can see opportunities that—" "The system works," I interrupted. "We haven't had a single shipment failure in 18 months. We passed our last federal audit with 0 violations. The pharmaceutical contracts alone are worth—" "Right, but those are backwards-looking metrics. I did my thesis on predictive analytics and supply chain. The future isn't about maintaining, it's about anticipating." I stared at him, this 26-year-old with his thesis and his buzzwords, who'd never talked a panicked driver through a system failure at 3 a.m., who'd never held together a multi-million-dollar contract with nothing but expertise and sheer determination, was going to improve what I spent 14 years building. "I'll prepare the documentation," I said quietly. "Perfect. Marcus said you'd be a team player." He grinned and walked away, already texting someone, already moving on because I was just another task on his list, another resource to extract value from. I stood there in the break room, surrounded by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of forklifts in the warehouse, and felt something inside me crack. Not break, not yet, just crack, like ice on a frozen lake right before it gives way completely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at my ceiling, replaying every conversation, every performance review where Marcus called me essential and invaluable. Every time I'd stayed late or come in early because the company needed me. 14 years of excellent evaluations. 14 years of being told I mattered. All of it meaningless the moment his nephew needed a job. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. An email from Marcus. Subject: Transition Timeline. "Lauren, need comprehensive documentation by end of week. Include all vendor contacts, compliance procedures, equipment specs, emergency protocols. Jordan starts Monday and needs to hit the ground running. Thanks for making this smooth." No please, no acknowledgement of what he was asking, just an order to package up 14 years of my life and hand it to someone who thought predictive analytics was more valuable than actually knowing how things worked. I got out of bed, opened my laptop, started making a list of everything I'd need to document. The list grew longer and longer until my eyes burned and the sun started rising outside my window, and I realized something important. I was building 2 lists, one for Marcus and one for myself, because somewhere between his email and Miss Sunrise, a different kind of clarity had arrived, the kind that comes when you stop asking how could they do this to me and start asking what am I going to do about it. I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew I wasn't going to make anything smooth for anyone except myself. Jordan's first week was a masterclass in confident incompetence. He arrived Monday morning with an expensive leather messenger bag and a takeout latte, settling into the office that used to be mine, the one with the window overlooking the warehouse floor. I'd been moved to a cubicle near the break room where the coffee maker beeped all day long and the fluorescent lights flickered with a rhythm that matched my growing headache. "Lauren, quick question," Jordan called out around 10 a.m. I walked over to find him staring at the temperature monitoring dashboard like it was written in hieroglyphics. "What's this red alert thing?" I looked at the screen. That's Unit 7. The compressor's running hot. Needs immediate attention or we'll lose the entire pharmaceutical shipment inside. Okay, but how immediate? Right now, Jordan, that's a $180,000 load of temperature-sensitive medication. If it goes above 4 degrees Celsius for more than 20 minutes, it's unsalvageable. He blinked at me. Can you just handle it? I've got a meeting with Uncle Marcus in 10 minutes. I handled it. I called maintenance, supervised the transfer to backup storage, filed the incident report, and updated the client before their monitoring system flagged the deviation. Jordan never asked what happened. He just showed up to the afternoon status meeting and casually mentioned that we had a minor equipment issue that the team managed well. The team, as if he'd been anywhere near it. By Wednesday, I'd fixed 3 critical errors he'd made in our compliance documentation. He'd reversed temperature thresholds, mislabeled storage zones, and somehow scheduled the federal inspection for a date when half our equipment would be offline for maintenance. I was testing some optimization theories, he explained when I pointed out the mistakes. You can't innovate without experimentation. You can't experiment with federal compliance. One wrong report and we lose our certification. That ends the business. Jordan's smile thinned. Lauren, I appreciate your caution, but sometimes you have to break eggs to make an omelet, you know? I did not know. I only knew that I'd spent 14 years making sure no eggs ever broke, and now I was watching this kid juggle them blindfolded while everyone applauded his courage. Thursday afternoon, one of our oldest clients called, Pacific Medical Supply. They'd been with me since my 2nd year at the company. The operations manager, Sandra, had my personal cell number for emergencies. Lauren, what's going on over there? Sandra's voice was tight with concern. We got a shipping manifest that doesn't match our order. Temperature logs are incomplete. This isn't like you. There's been a transition in management. To who? You built this relationship. You know our requirements better than we do sometimes. I'm supporting the new manager, Jordan Webb. Silence on the other end. Then, Marcus's nephew? Yes. Another silence, the longer this time. Lauren, level with me. Should I be worried? I wanted to scream yes. I wanted to tell her that everything we'd built together over 12 years was now in the hands of someone who thought supply chain management was a theoretical exercise. Instead, I said, I'm still here. I'll make sure your shipments are handled correctly. But for how long? I didn't have an answer. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot after everyone else had left. The warehouse lights cast long shadows across the empty loading bays. My phone buzzed with another email from Jordan, sent at 9:30 p.m., asking me to just quickly fix a vendor contract he'd messed up. The kind of contract I took 6 weeks of negotiations to finalize. The kind he'd edited without reading because he thought his NBA gave him permission to improvise. I was so tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that lives in your bones and whispers that maybe everyone else is right. Maybe you're just resistant to change. Maybe you're too cautious. Maybe fresh perspectives really are more valuable than experience earned through years of showing up and doing the work. My mother called while I was sitting there. Hi, sweetheart. Just checking in. You sounded stressed yesterday. I'm fine, Mom. You're not fine. I can hear it in your voice. A pause. What's happening at work? I told her, all of it. The replacement, the nephew, the mistakes, the erosion of everything I'd built. She listened without interrupting the way she always had. When she finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, Lauren, honey, do you remember when your father lost his job at the print shop? You were about 16. Yeah, the new owner brought in his son-in-law to manage everything. Your father trains that man for 6 months, taught him everything about running a print operation, and then they let your father go, said they didn't need 2 managers. I'd forgotten that part, blocked it out maybe. The memory came back now. My father sitting at the kitchen table night after night, looking smaller somehow, drinking coffee that gone cold hours ago. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying I watched what that did to your father, how he blamed himself, how he thought he'd failed. But he didn't fail, Lauren. He just trusted the wrong people. Her voice got softer. Don't do what he did. Don't stay until they've taken everything from you.
We said goodnight, and I sat there in the darkness thinking about my father, about how he'd never quite recovered from that betrayal, about how I'd promised myself I'd never let anyone make me feel that small. And yet, here I was 14 years later, making that same promise mean nothing. Friday morning, Marcus called me into his office again. Jordan was already there, sitting in the chair I used to occupy. "Lauren, sit down," Marcus said, gesturing to the other chair, the one for visitors. "We need to talk about the transition timeline. I've prepared all the documentation you requested. Everything Jordan needs is in the shared drive organized by priority." "Right, about that." Marcus glanced at Jordan. "My nephew feels like the documentation is a little overwhelming, too detailed. He needs something more high level." I looked at Jordan. He had the decency to look uncomfortable at least. "The documentation is detailed because the work is detailed," I said slowly. "You can't manage cold storage operations with high-level summaries. There are federal regulations, client-specific requirements, equipment specifications." "Okay, but hear me out." "No," I said. Both men stopped talking. "I won't hear you out. I won't simplify 14 years of expertise into something your business school textbook can digest. Either you learn how this actually works or you don't, but I'm not going to help you dismantle something I built just because you think you know better." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Marcus's expression hardened. "Lauren, I understand you're having trouble adjusting to the new structure, but Jordan is your manager now. If he says something needs to be done differently, that's how it gets done. He's not qualified to manage this operation. That's not your call to make." "It's exactly my call to make. I've been making that call for 14 years while you collected bonuses from the contracts I secured and the disasters I prevented." My hands were shaking now, but my voice stayed steady. "Jordan doesn't know, but he doesn't know, and you don't can because he's family." Marcus stood up. "I think you need to take the rest of the day off. Come back Monday with a better attitude, or we'll need to have a different conversation." "I'll take the day off," I said quietly, "but I'm not the only one who needs an attitude adjustment." I walked out of his office with my head up and my chest tight, feeling everyone's eyes on me as I crossed the floor. No one said anything. They just watched me leave the way people watch accidents happen, with a mixture of relief that it's not them and guilt that they're not helping. In my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Carrie, one of the warehouse supervisors I'd trained. "That took guts, but Lauren, be careful. Marcus doesn't forgive people who challenge him." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I drove home and sat on my couch in the middle of the afternoon, surrounded by silence, trying to figure out who I'd become. When had I turned into someone who accepted being erased? When did I start believing that staying quiet was the same as being professional? And more importantly, when was I going to stop? That night, I opened my laptop and started looking at my employment contract, reading through the sections about intellectual property, documentation, confidentiality, looking for the edges, the boundaries, the places where what I knew became something I could use.
I wasn't sure what I was looking for yet, but I knew I was done being grateful for the chance to hand over everything I'd built to someone who couldn't even read a temperature gauge. Something was shifting inside me, something Marcus and Jordan hadn't seen coming because they'd made the mistake of thinking I'd always be there, always comply, always do what was expected. They were about to learn the difference between quiet and powerless, and I was about to teach them. Monday morning, I walked into Web Logistics with the decision I'd made somewhere around 3 a.m., when sleep became impossible and clarity arrived in its place. I was going to leave, but I wasn't going to leave quietly. Marcus and Jordan had spent 2 weeks assuming my compliance. They'd built their entire transition plan on the foundation of my silence, my professionalism, my desperate need for a steady paycheck. They weren't wrong about the paycheck. I had bills, I had my mother's care to think about, I had a life built on financial stability. But somewhere between Friday's confrontation and Monday's sunrise, I'd realized something crucial. Staying was going to cost me more than leaving ever could. The office felt different that morning, or maybe I felt different in it. I sat down at my cubicle and opened my email to find 17 messages from Jordan, all sent over the weekend, all variations of, "Hey, quick question," and "Can you just clarify?" and "Not sure I understand this part." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened the company's shared drive and started making copies. Not of client information, that would be theft. Not of proprietary systems, that would violate my contract. Just my own work. The documentation I'd written, the procedures I'd designed, the incident reports I'd filed, the warnings I'd sent, the recommendations I'd made that had been ignored. 14 years of my professional life, organized by date, backed up to an external drive. Around 10 a.m., Jordan appeared at my cubicle. "Hey, did you see my emails?" "I did." And I'm working on my projects?" His smile faltered. "Okay, but I kind of need answers to those questions." "The answers are in the documentation I already prepared." "Right, but it's like really detailed. Can you just give me the simplified version?" I looked up at him, really looked at him, saw the expensive watch, the designer glasses, the entitled expectation that I would always make his life easier at the expense of my own dignity. "No," I said simply. "No?" "No, Jordan, I can't simplify what took me 14 years to learn. If you want to manage this operation, you'll need to actually learn how it works." His expressions cycled through confusion, annoyance, then something that looked like panic. "Uncle Marcus said you'd be cooperative during the transition." "I've been extremely cooperative. I've provided comprehensive documentation that Jordan hasn't bothered to read." "She's being really hostile," Jordan interjected. "I just asked a few simple questions and she—" "I declined to do your job for you," I corrected. "There's a difference." The HR woman scribbled something on her pad. Marcus leaned forward. "Lauren, I'm going to be frank. Your attitude over the past week has been concerning. I understand change is difficult, but this company needs team players. If you can't support Jordan's leadership—" "Jordan isn't a leader. He's a 26-year-old with an MBA and no operational experience who got this job because he shares your last name." The words came out calm and clear. No anger, just truth. "And you know it. That's why you need me to keep fixing his mistakes. That's why he's in here complaining that I won't keep making his incompetence invisible anymore." The HR woman stopped writing. Marcus's face went red. "That's completely inappropriate. What's inappropriate is replacing a qualified manager with your unqualified nephew and expecting me to train him while he takes credit for my work and I take a demotion disguised as transition support." I looked directly at the HR woman. "I assume you're documenting this conversation. Please document that I've raised concerns about nepotism, inadequate qualifications, and a pattern of operational errors that I've been forced to correct without recognition or compensation." She blinked at me, pen hovering over paper. Marcus stood up. "I think we're done here. Lauren, take the rest of the week off. When you come back, we'll discuss whether you still have a future at this company." I stood too, slowly letting the moment settle. "I'll take the week, but Marcus, I've been documenting everything, every error, every ignored warning, every time you've prioritized your nephew's ego over this company's safety and compliance." I picked up my bag. "If you're going to fire me, make sure you're prepared for what comes next." I walked out before he could respond. The warehouse floor was quiet as I left, that mid-shift lull when everyone's focused on work. A few people glanced up, saw me leaving early again, and quickly looked away. Only Carrie met my eyes. She gave me a tiny nod, the kind that says, "I see you, I understand, I can't say it out loud." In my car, my hands finally started shaking. Not from fear, from something like exhilaration. I'd just blown up 14 years of professional restraint in a single meeting. I'd just walked away from a steady paycheck with nothing lined up. I'd just made myself unemployable in a region where everyone knew Marcus Webb. And I felt more clear-headed than I had in months. That week off, I didn't rest.
I worked harder than I'd ever worked at Web Logistics, but this time I was working for myself. I contacted an employment attorney named Patricia Chen, who listened to my story with the kind of focused attention that told me she'd heard variations of it 100 times before. Do you have documentation? 14 years worth. Good. Keep it organized. Chronological order. Patterns are more valuable than isolated incidents. She leaned back in her chair. Here's what you need to understand, Lauren. Nepotism isn't illegal, but it creates liability when unqualified people make decisions that endanger compliance, safety, or client contracts. If you can demonstrate a pattern of negligence that you were forced to correct, and then show that you were punished for speaking up about it, you've got a case. I don't want money. I want them to understand what they did, what they're still doing. Patricia smiled slightly. In my experience, understanding usually follows consequences. Let's work on consequences first. I spent the rest of that week organizing everything, creating a timeline, matching Jordan's errors to my corrections, documenting every warning I'd sent Marcus that he'd dismissed, building a story that wasn't about revenge, it was about truth rendered inescapable. On Thursday afternoon, I got an email from Jordan. No greeting, no signature, just one line. Uncle Marcus says we're letting you go. Need you to return all company property by Friday. I read it 3 times, waiting to feel something. Anger, grief, panic. Instead, I felt relief. They'd just made my decision for me, and they'd done it in writing. I responded, received. I'll return all company property except personal documentation of my own work. Please confirm my final paycheck and accrued vacation will be processed per California labor law. Then I called Patricia Chen. They fired me, I said. Good, she replied. Now we can talk about what you really want to do with all that documentation you've been organizing. What do you mean? Well, you could file a wrongful termination suit. We'd probably win a settlement. Or, she paused, you could consider whether any of those compliance violations you documented should be reported to the federal agencies that regulate your industry. Public interest overrides company loyalty when safety is involved. I sat with that for a moment, thought about Pacific Medical Supply and the dozens of other clients who trusted Web Logistics with temperature-sensitive shipments, thought about the pharmaceutical companies whose life-saving medications passed through our warehouses, thought about all the future failures Jordan would cause because no one was there to stop him anymore. What would that look like? I asked. You submit a formal complaint to the FDA and OSHA, backed by evidence of systematic compliance failures. They investigate. If they find violations, there are fines, mandatory corrections, possible loss of certification. I thought about my father, sitting at that kitchen table, accepting blame for someone else's inadequacy. I thought about 14 years of my expertise being treated like it was disposable. I thought about how many more people Marcus would hire based on family connections instead of competence, how many more professionals he'd use and discard.
Let's do it, I said. Patricia walked me through the process. How to organize evidence for federal review, how to separate legitimate concerns from personal grievances, how to make sure everything I submitted was factual, documented, and irrefutable. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and years of my life spread across the screen in neat folders. Temperature logs, incident reports, warning emails, client complaints, equipment failures, near misses that became disasters averted. My mother came over for dinner. She looked at the organized chaos on my table and said, "That's a lot of work for someone who just got fired." "It's closure," I said. She nodded slowly. "Your father never got that. He always wondered if he could have done something differently, if he'd been better somehow." She touched my shoulder. "I'm glad you're not going to wonder." We ate pasta and talked about other things. Her garden, her book club, my brother's upcoming visit. Normal things. Life continuing despite everything. But every time I glanced at my laptop, I felt that same clarity I'd found in Marcus's office. I wasn't doing this because I was angry. I was doing this because someone had to. Because silence protects the wrong people. because professional restraint had been confused with professional surrender for too long. Friday morning, I drove to Web Logistics one last time, walked in with a box containing my keys, my badge, and nothing else. Jordan was conveniently absent. Marcus was in a meeting. I left the box with the receptionist, who couldn't look me in the eye. "Good luck," she whispered as I turned to leave. "You too," I said. In my car, I pulled out my phone and sent the email I'd been drafting all week. To FDA Compliance Division, to OSHA Regional Office, subject, formal complaint, Web Logistics, Sacramento Facility. Attached, please find documentation of systematic compliance violations. I hit send and sat there for a moment, engine running, watching the building that had been the center of my life for 14 years. Then I drove away. The investigation took 6 months to gain momentum, but when it did, it was thorough. FDA inspectors showed up unannounced. OSHA conducted surprise audits. Clients started asking questions. I heard about it through Carrie, who texted me updates she wasn't supposed to share. They're panicking. Jordan got suspended. Marcus hired 3 lawyers. Another client pulled their contract. Pacific Medical moved to a competitor. Federal auditors found 8 major violations. Companies fighting the fines, but it's not looking good. I never responded to those texts, just read them and felt something that wasn't quite satisfaction, more like vindication. Proof that my 14 years of work had actually mattered. The evidence was in how quickly everything fell apart without me. During those 6 months, I found a new job, a smaller logistics company in San Jose run by a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd spent 20 years in pharmaceutical distribution before starting her own firm. She interviewed me for 2 hours, asking detailed technical questions that actually required expertise to answer. At the end, she said, "I know what happened at Webb. Marcus's reputation preceded his nephew's failures." I tensed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She continued, "I called 3 of your former clients. They all said the same thing. You were the only reason they stayed with Webb as long as they did. Sandra from Pacific Medical called you the most competent operations manager she'd ever worked with." Sarah smiled. "I don't need references from Marcus Webb. I need someone who knows what they're doing. When can you start?" I started the following Monday. The work was different, smaller scale but higher stakes, specialized pharmaceutical transport that required even more precision than what I'd done before. She trusted me, asked for my input, paid me 30% more than Marcus ever had, gave me an office with a window. Most importantly, she let me do my job without having to pretend someone else was doing it. 3 months into my new position, I got a LinkedIn message from Jordan. "Hey Lauren, I know things ended badly between us. I've had time to reflect. I realize now that I was way over my head and you were trying to help me see that. I'm sorry for not listening. Hope you're doing well." I stared at the message for a long time, thought about all the responses I could send, the angry ones, the vindicated ones, the carefully professional ones that would make me look good. In the end, I didn't respond at all. Some apologies come too late. Some bridges burn for good reason, and some people only learn to appreciate what they had after they've lost it. Jordan Webb wasn't my problem anymore.
9 months after I left Web Logistics, Patricia Chen called me. "The FDA released their findings," she said. "Are you sitting down?" I was in my new office, reviewing a shipment manifest that actually made sense. What did they find? Systematic compliance failures going back 3 years, inadequate temperature monitoring, falsified safety records, equipment maintenance violations, and, this is the significant part, evidence that concerns were repeatedly reported internally and ignored by senior management. They're using my documentation. They're using your documentation. The report specifically notes detailed incident records provided by a former operations manager demonstrating pattern of ignored safety warnings. She paused. "Lauren, they're recommending $2.3 million in fines and mandatory third-party oversight for 18 months. I set down my pen. That could destroy the company. It could. or it could force them to actually operate safely. Either way, it's not your responsibility anymore. After we hung up, I sat there looking out my office window. Below me, the warehouse floor hummed with efficient activity, properly trained staff, maintained equipment, Sarah Chen walking the floor, stopping to ask questions, actually listening to answers. This was what good management looked like. And somewhere across town, Marcus Webb was learning what happens when you mistake control for competence. The Sacramento Business Journal covered the story a week later. Small article on page 6. Local logistics firm faces federal penalties. It didn't mention me by name. Didn't need to. Everyone in the industry knew. Carrie texted me the morning the article came out. Marcus resigned. Board forced him out. Jordan's been gone for months. Apparently, he's working at his dad's real estate office now. They're bringing in an outside CEO to clean everything up. It's chaos, but also maybe better. Thanks for everything you did, even if you never get credit for it. I saved that text. 2 days later, Pacific Medical's Sandra called me directly. Lauren, I heard about the FDA findings. I wanted you to know I gave a statement during their investigation, told them about every near miss you prevented, every time you went above and beyond to keep our shipments safe. Her voice was quiet. I'm sorry we didn't speak up when Marcus replaced you. We should have. I said, you were protecting your contract. I understand. Still, you deserved better. She paused. Is Dr. Chen's firm taking new clients? Because Pacific Medical just terminated our contract with Webb. We need a logistics partner we can actually trust. I smiled. I'll have Sarah call you. That's how consequences work in real life. Not dramatic courtroom confrontations, not viral social media posts. Just slow, steady accountability that catches up eventually. Just the truth becoming unavoidable when enough people finally decide to stop ignoring it. That winter, I took my mother to San Francisco for her birthday. We walked through Golden Gate Park, ate overpriced pasta in North Beach, laughed about nothing important. She was getting older, forgetting more, repeating herself, sometimes mixing up my name with my brother's. But one afternoon, sitting on a bench watching the fog roll in, she turned to me with complete clarity. You seem different, she said. Different how? Lighter, like you're not carrying something heavy anymore. I thought about that, about the weight of staying where I wasn't valued, about the exhaustion of being invisible while doing visible work, about how much space opens up in your life when you stop accepting less than you deserve. I agreed. Your father never got there, she said softly. He carried that weight until he died. I'm so glad you didn't. We sat there in the fog, two women who'd both loved men who'd been betrayed by systems that didn't value their expertise, and I understood something I hadn't before. Revenge isn't about making other people hurt. It's about refusing to hurt yourself anymore. 6 months later, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. Ms. Harmon, my name is Jennifer Park. I'm a compliance officer at Webb Logistics, or what's left of it. I wanted you to know that your documentation saved this company, not from consequences, those were deserved, but from complete collapse. The new CEO used your procedures to rebuild our entire operation. Your temperature protocols are now our standard. Your training manuals are what we use to onboard new staff. Your risk assessments guide our decision-making. I never met you, but everyone here talks about you like you're a legend. I thought you should know that your work outlasted the people who tried to erase it. Thank you. I read that email 3 times, printed it out, put it in a drawer with Carrie's text and a few other pieces of evidence that my 14 years had actually meant something. Then I went back to work. Because that's the thing about revenge no one tells you. The satisfaction doesn't come from watching other people fail. It comes from building something better. It comes from proving that your worth wasn't dependent on whether anyone acknowledged it. It comes from waking up every morning and choosing a life where you're valued, respected, and compensated fairly, not because you fought for it dramatically, but simply because you refused to accept less anymore. Marcus Webb lost his company.
Jordan Webb learned that family connections can open doors, but competence determines whether you stay in the room. The FDA's oversight continues. Webb Logistics survived, but transformed into something more honest. And me, I'm still in cold storage logistics, still managing temperature-sensitive shipments, still preventing disasters most people never know almost happened. But now I do it in an office with a window, for a boss who listens, surrounded by people who know my name and my worth. That's my revenge. Not destruction, reconstruction. Building a life where betrayal couldn't touch me anymore, because I'd stopped giving unworthy people access to what mattered most. Some nights I still think about that conference room, about Marcus's smile when he told me I'd be supporting Jordan, about the moment I nodded and pretended to understand, about all the ways I made myself smaller to fit into spaces that were never meant to honor me. But mostly, I think about the woman I am now, the one who walked away, the one who documented everything, the one who chose truth over silence and dignity over acceptance. I sleep better now. My mother notices. My friends notice. I notice. And somewhere in Sacramento, there's a USB drive in a federal filing cabinet containing 14 years of my professional life marked as evidence in a case about what happens when you mistake someone's quiet competence for unlimited tolerance. That drive tells the truth I used to be afraid to speak. Now, I don't need it to speak for me. I can do that myself. If you've ever felt erased by people who should have valued you, I see you. If you've ever walked away from a place that took everything and gave nothing back, I understand. Leave a comment with your story. Like this video if it resonated. Subscribe if you want to hear more about what happens when quiet people stop being quiet. And remember, your worth isn't determined by the people who couldn't see it. It's determined by whether you refuse to stay where you're not seen. Share this if you know someone who needs to hear it.